She could have played it safe. She could have taken the guaranteed path to stardom, the one paved with golden contracts and studio protection. But Julie Andrews, the woman who would become the world's most beloved nanny and governess, chose something far more dangerous. She chose authenticity over security, craft over comfort, and in doing so, she didn't just build a career. She built a legend. This is the untold story of the calculated risks, painful sacrifices, and defiant choices that transformed a working-class girl from Surrey into one of cinema's most enduring icons. The year was 1954, and 18-year-old Julie Andrews stood at the crossroads of destiny. Broadway producers circled her like sharks sensing blood in the water, each offering contracts that would have set her up for life. The girl with the 4-octave voice had already conquered London's West End, and now America beckoned with promises of immediate stardom and financial security beyond her wildest dreams. But little did the world know, behind that radiant smile and crystalline voice lay a calculating mind that understood something her contemporaries didn't. Easy success rarely leads to lasting greatness. While other young performers were signing their lives away to studio systems and management companies that promised to make them stars overnight, Julie Andrews was quietly studying the careers of those who had come before her. She had watched actresses like Judy Garland, brilliant and beloved, yet trapped in contracts that controlled every aspect of their lives. She had seen how the Hollywood machine could chew up and spit out even the most talented performers once they were no longer profitable. The easy option signing with a major studio, accepting the first lucrative contract, letting others shape her career, would have guaranteed comfort but potentially sacrificed her artistic soul. Instead, Andrews made a choice that shocked industry insiders. She turned down offer after offer, waiting for the right opportunity that would allow her to maintain creative control. Her friends thought she was mad. Her family worried about their financial future. But Julie Andrews had a vision that extended far beyond her teenage years. A vision that would ultimately prove her instincts were not just correct, but prophetic. The public saw Julie Andrews as the perfect child, well-mannered, talented, and seemingly born for the spotlight. But the truth behind her early years was far more complex and painful than anyone could have imagined. Born Julia Elizabeth Wells to a working-class family in Surrey, her childhood was marked by the kind of instability that would have broken a lesser spirit. Her mother, Barbara, was a piano teacher with unfulfilled dreams of her own stardom. Her father, Ted Wells, was a woodwork teacher who struggled with the demands of having a child prodigy in the family. When her parents divorced and her mother remarried, Julie found herself in a blended family with a stepfather who had his own ambitions for her career. The family dynamic was complicated, often tense, and always centered around Julie's extraordinary talent. What the world didn't know was that Julie's perfect pitch and seemingly effortless performances were the result of relentless practice and pressure from adults who saw her as their ticket to a better life. By age 8, she was performing professionally, her childhood sacrificed on the altar of her family's financial needs. The easy option would have been to rebel, to refuse to perform, to demand a normal childhood like other kids her age. Instead, Julie chose to embrace her gift while secretly protecting her inner self. She developed what psychologists would later recognize as remarkable emotional intelligence, learning to compartmentalize the demands of performance from her authentic self. This early lesson in maintaining personal boundaries while excelling professionally would become the foundation of every major career decision she would make for the rest of her life. When Frederick Loewe and Alan J. Lerner were casting for a new musical called My Fair Lady, they had one name at the top of their list: Julie Andrews. But landing the role of Eliza Doolittle wasn't the easy victory it appeared to be from the outside. Behind the scenes, a complex web of negotiations, politics, and artistic compromise threatened to derail what would become one of Broadway's most iconic productions. The easy option would have been for Andrews to accept whatever terms were offered. She was still relatively unknown in America, and My Fair Lady represented the kind of career-defining opportunity that most actresses would kill for. But Julie had learned something crucial from watching other performers. How you enter a production often determines how much control you have throughout its run. Rather than jumping at the first offer, Andrews did something almost unheard of. For a young actress, she negotiated. Not just for money, though that was important, but for creative input and the right to shape her interpretation of Eliza. She studied George Bernard Shaw's original, Pygmalion, extensively, developing her own understanding of the character that went deeper than the musical's adaptation. The gamble paid off in ways no one could have predicted. Andrews' Eliza was not just a singing voice delivering beautiful melodies. She was a fully realized character whose transformation from flower girl to lady felt authentic and earned. The role ran for over 3 years, but more importantly, it established Andrews as an actress who brought intelligence and depth to every performance. This reputation would follow her throughout her career, opening doors that might have remained closed to performers who were seen as merely talented singers rather than complete artists. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in 1963, and it shattered Julie Andrews' heart into 1,000 pieces. Warner Brothers had decided to cast Audrey Hepburn as Eliza Doolittle in the film adaptation of My Fair Lady. The role that had defined Andrews' career, that she had performed over 2,000 times on Broadway and in London's West End, would go to someone else, someone who couldn't even sing the songs and would need to be dubbed. The easy option would have been bitterness. Many performers who had been passed over for film adaptations of their stage roles had let resentment consume their careers. Some had spoken out publicly, burning bridges with producers and studios. Others had retreated from the spotlight entirely, unable to cope with what felt like the ultimate betrayal. But Julie Andrews chose a different path entirely. Rather than wallow in disappointment or rage against the injustice, she used the rejection as fuel for transformation. Within weeks of learning about the casting decision, she had committed to 2 projects that would prove to be career-defining: Mary Poppins with Walt Disney and The Sound of Music with Robert Wise. What the world didn't know was that Andrews had been approached about both films months earlier, but had hesitated, thinking that the My Fair Lady film would be her transition to Hollywood stardom. The rejection forced her to reevaluate her options, and in doing so, she discovered something remarkable. Sometimes losing one dream leads you to something even greater than you could have imagined. The woman who had been deemed not glamorous enough for one film would soon become the face of family entertainment and one of the most beloved stars in cinema history. Walt Disney was known for many things, but taking chances on unknown quantities wasn't one of them. His live-action films had been modest successes, but nothing compared to the empire he'd built with animation. So when he announced that he was not only making a big-budget live-action musical, but casting it with a relatively unknown Broadway actress, industry insiders questioned his judgment. The easy option for Disney would have been to cast a proven Hollywood star, someone like Debbie Reynolds or Doris Day, who had box office appeal and name recognition. Julie Andrews, while critically acclaimed on Broadway, was an unknown quantity to American moviegoers. The financial risk was enormous, and Disney's board of directors made their concerns clear in heated meetings that sometimes lasted well into the night. Walt Disney saw something in Julie Andrews that others missed. During their first meeting, he didn't just listen to her sing. He watched how she carried herself, how she interacted with his creative team, how she asked questions about the character and the story. He recognized in her the same quality that had made his animated heroines so enduring, an authentic goodness that couldn't be faked or manufactured. Decision to cast Andrews as Mary Poppins wasn't just about her voice. though that 4-octave range didn't hurt. It was about her ability to embody the magical qualities the character required, while remaining grounded and believable. Disney understood that the film would succeed or fail based on whether audiences believed in Mary Poppins as a real person, not just a fantasy character. In Julie Andrews, he found an actress who could make the impossible seem not just possible, but inevitable. Creating Mary Poppins wasn't just about memorizing lines and hitting high notes. Julie Andrews approached the role with the dedication of a method actor, despite having no formal training in the technique. She spent months researching the character, reading P.L. Travers' original books, studying the mannerisms of proper English nannies, and even observing children to understand how they would react to someone like Mary Poppins. The easy option would have been to rely on her natural charisma and vocal talent. Many musical performers of that era were content to show up, sing beautifully, look glamorous, and collect their paychecks. But Andrews understood that Mary Poppins was more than just a role. It was an opportunity to create something that could touch people's lives for generations. She worked with dialect coaches to perfect not just Mary's accent, but the subtle variations that would indicate the character's mysterious background. She studied dance with choreographer Mark Bro for months before filming began, not just learning the steps, but understanding how Mary's movements should reflect her personality: confident, graceful, but never showy. Perhaps most importantly, Andrews spent time with child psychologists to understand how to work with her young co-stars in a way that felt natural rather than forced. She knew that the believability of her relationship with the Banks children would make or break the film. By the time cameras rolled, she had developed not just a performance, but a complete persona that was so convincing it seemed effortless, the mark of truly masterful preparation. The telegram arrived while Julie Andrews was still in production on Mary Poppins, and its contents would have made any musical theater performer's heart race. Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, too, the legendary team behind Oklahoma, South Pacific, and The King and I, wanted to meet with her about their next project, a film adaptation of a Broadway musical that had closed after only 16 performances. Most advisors would have counseled against it. The Sound of Music had been considered a disappointment on Broadway, and the film rights had been passed around Hollywood for years without anyone showing serious interest. The safe play would have been to wait and see how Mary Poppins performed at the box office before committing to another musical, especially one with such a checkered history. But Andrews saw something in the material that others had missed. The story of Maria von Trapp wasn't just another musical biography. It was a tale of someone who chose love and authenticity over security and convention. Maria had left the safety of the convent to become a governess, then chose to flee Nazi-occupied Austria rather than compromise her family's values. It was a story that resonated deeply with Andrews' own journey of choosing artistic integrity over easy success. The decision to take on Maria von Trapp was perhaps the most calculated risk of Andrews' career. She was betting everything on her ability to bring depth and authenticity to a character that could easily have been saccharine or one-dimensional. The role required her to age from a young postulant to a mother of 7, to convey both vulnerability and strength, and to make audiences believe in a love story that spanned one of history's darkest periods. The Austrian Alps in 1964 were breathtaking, but they were also brutally demanding. Director Robert Wise had a reputation as a perfectionist, and he expected nothing less from his cast and crew than complete commitment to his vision. For Julie Andrews, this meant takes upon takes of running through mountain meadows, spinning with arms outstretched, and singing at full voice in the thin mountain air. The easy option would have been to use a double for the wide shots, to lip-sync to pre-recorded tracks, to take shortcuts that would have saved time and energy. But Andrews understood that The Sound of Music lived or died on its authenticity. If audiences didn't believe that Maria von Trapp was truly alive in those mountains, truly in love with both the landscape and her family, the entire film would feel hollowed out. She insisted on doing her own running, her own spinning, her own singing in the mountain air that left her breathless and dizzy. Take after take, she delivered the same energy and joy, even when her legs ached from running up and down hills, even when the wind whipped her hair into her eyes and made it difficult to see her marks. The famous opening sequence of The Sound of Music looks effortless on screen, but it was the result of days of grueling work in challenging conditions. Andrews' commitment to authenticity extended to every aspect of her performance, from learning to conduct a children's choir to mastering the guitar so that her finger positions would be correct in close-ups. This attention to detail, this refusal to take shortcuts, became the hallmark of her professional approach and set a standard that few performers have ever matched. The year 1965 should have been impossible. No performer in Hollywood history had ever opened two major musical films in the same year, much less two that would both become massive global phenomena. But Julie Andrews accomplished exactly that, with Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, both becoming cultural touchstones that continue to enchant audiences more than half a century later. The easy prediction would have been that one film would overshadow the other, that audiences would prefer one character to the other, that Andrews would be typecast and her career would peak with these early successes. Industry experts predicted that she would struggle to find roles that could match the impact of Mary Poppins and Maria von Trapp, that she would become a prisoner of her own success. But Andrews had prepared for this challenge long before it arrived. Even as she was basking in the unprecedented success of both films, she was already planning her next moves, studying scripts that would challenge her in different ways, seeking out directors who would push her beyond the boundaries of musical comedy. She understood that true longevity in Hollywood required constant evolution and the willingness to surprise audiences who thought they had her figured out. The dual success of Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music didn't just make Andrews a star. It made her a brand. But unlike many performers who become trapped by their most successful roles, she viewed this success as a foundation to build upon rather than a cage to be trapped within. The careful choices she had made throughout her early career had prepared her for this moment of triumph, and she was ready to use her newfound power to take even greater creative risks. Success at the level Julie Andrews achieved in the mid-1960s came with unexpected costs. Suddenly, she wasn't just an actress. She was a symbol of wholesomeness and family values that the public was reluctant to let go of. Every role she was offered seemed to be a variation on Mary Poppins or Maria von Trapp, and directors seemed unable to envision her as anything other than the perfect singing nanny or governess. The easy option would have been to embrace this typecasting, to build a career around variations on her most successful roles. The financial rewards would have been substantial, and the public clearly had an insatiable appetite for Julie Andrews in these types of characters. Many performers would have been thrilled to have such a reliable formula for success, a guaranteed audience that would follow them from project to project.